Now I'd like to introduce Julio Ottino. He is one of the most multifarious thinkers that I've met, and you're going to see a representation of that multifaceted perspective. Julio Ottino.
Thank you. So I'll wait until the first slideshow.
Push the button, it should go right into
Okay, that's me. So in some things I'm going to go way, way back. I'm going to show you things that are 100 years old, okay? But initially, Rob had asked me to be the third speaker to kind of put together the previous two talk, which is obviously impossible, okay? However, what I will argue is that everybody in humanity, I'm talking about people who work on something of consequential value, fits in one of these three domains. People probably fit in two. I doubt that anybody fits in three. There are people who look on the organizational world. So the conversation at the beginning was more on that. There are people who work on the creation side of things. There were some elements of that. The second talk. I come from academia, so almost by definition, I have to fit on the third one, which is the knowledge side of things. Now, universities work really hard to produce people who are good in one of these domains. Very hard to produce people who are very good in two. Now, let me tell you something about me so you can more or less benchmark what I'm going to say. I was born in Argentina. I grew up by liking math. And since my mother was an artist, I kind of grew around art, and I started doing things much sooner than I became good in math. But then the world that I grew up with became, to say the least, highly chaotic around me. When I finished college, military service was compulsory. You could defer, but out of all the people who are drafted, and if you draw a really bad number, you got Navy. That was 2 years. That's what I draw. There was a plan to probably grab about 200 people out of maybe 20,000 and try to make them officers. And that's what I became, an officer in the Argentinian Navy. In the middle of this is when a government was deposed, 30,000 people vanished. I knew people from both sides who disappeared. And there were basically two options. Either you became embroiled in some kind of political thing and you will probably vanish. So for example, the Navy had use for engineers, economists, doctors, lawyers. If you were in any kind of social science, you are by definition on the left and you could vanish, okay? So in the middle of this, there was a revolution, and for me, math became like the cathedral of pure thoughts that I could go, and art became a refuge, it's almost cathartic, where I put my thoughts and passion. Now, when I finished this, I wanted the hell out. We had a honeymoon of about 5 days, getting a visa in the American embassy. My wife-to-be had to have permission from the family because she was 18. And I came here, and I started doing research. I became really good at. I think research, you probably have 3 good ideas in your lifetime. But very quickly, I was in the cover of Nature and Scientific American, and very much by accident, well, I was given no option. I was made chair of a department. I discovered I was okay doing that thing. Then I left that, created actually with someone from Kellogg, an Institute of Complex Systems. And then also by chance, because I was in the search committee, I became dean. And then I discovered that I could be a curator for talent. I could assemble people, I could motivate people. It was like being the director of an orchestra and putting the players together. I discovered that I was a sort of academic entrepreneur. And you discover on 2 things. You work on ideas and people, and sometimes the ideas and people go together. But that's everything that I will say comes attached to those kinds of thoughts. So we were asked to think about a critical challenge and a question. And my critical challenge and question is, how do we educate leaders that can traverse multiple domains? Multiple domains are the ones that I mentioned before: organization, creation, knowledge. Now, this is what I believe, okay? Life is like driving in an impenetrable fog. In front of you, you see 5 feet. Every prediction now is a 5-feet prediction. But everything in a rear-view mirror is perfectly clear, okay? So there are many people who are in the business of prediction. The economist predicts, well, and actually they are very good. They tell you how well they were the year before, and they bet about 50%. But there was another one that I really like, and of all places appeared in the Ladies' Home Journal. And this was 100 years ago. This guy, who happens to have been an engineer, collected the thoughts of the best minds of his time. By the way, just to tell you how the world changed so much in 100 years, if you Google this, you will find the version in German that was published in a newspaper in Milwaukee. There was a German paper in Milwaukee 100 years ago. Okay? So I'm going to highlight a few predictions in here. And this is 100 years. One was, this one we will get right now because the science of demographics is really advanced. We can tell you exactly that by 2025, 1/5 of the population in the US will be 65 and over, whereas in China will be 1/3. We'll know by how much the population of Russia will diminish, everything. Another prediction, now the Mexico one was a little bit of the mark in there. Another one, this is 1900. Remember, about 1/3 of all arable land was used for feeding horses. And by the way, planes came in 1903, and they didn't come instantly. Another prediction was this one, which I find unbelievable. Man will see around the world. It will be possible to connect screens thousands of miles away. And then he went to say, it will be possible to see the coronations of kings of Europe and battles in the Orient.
Wow. Wow.
And I will finish with this one. There will be no letters C, X, or Q in our everyday alphabet, okay? And the second most popular language will be Russian. Yeah. Whereas the population of Russia will probably go down by 1/3 in about 20 years. So prediction is tough. However, if it were possible to stay really at the boundary of all available knowledge, get the best minds of your time, and peer into there at what is called the adjacent possible. This is an idea that comes from evolutionary biology. Okay? It will be possible sometimes to see a little bit in the future, and those seeing the future represents breakthroughs, or sometimes break with, because in order to go there, you need to abandon something that you know deeply here. Intellectual ventures, before they went bad, was predicated on this idea. Okay? Everybody tries to do this. I tried to do this in this op-ed, and I basically picked 3 things that they were there. Culture. By the way, I wrote this because I was sick and tired of everybody being so pessimistic. So over the Christmas break, we decided to do this. 3 advantages of the US: demographics, culture, especially having people who have a contrarian view of things, and then higher education, and then merge with 3 things that are out there: the web of things, or the industrial internet, the cloud and all the implications. For example, I discovered that hospitals are built in the cloud. People who build buildings that they own, and this is happening only in the US. Okay? And then 3D printing, additive manufacturing, that is, this progresses at the speed in which the SpaceX is building pieces in titanium using additive manufacturing. So this will change all manufacturing completely, because the idea is that this can extend even to biological systems. So the other people who made predictions, this just came out about a week ago, was from IBM. They interviewed 1,700 CEOs, and they tried to make predictions 3 to 5 years ahead, or how people feel about 3-5 years ahead. And the prediction was that, or the concern was that technology tops everything, including the economy. Okay? This is the major preoccupation. But 2 years ago, and the predictions overlap because it's 3-5 years, IBM put this report. There were probably less people in less countries. Okay? And the main preoccupation was how to deal with complexity. And the main safeguard, the number one leadership characteristic of future leaders was creativity. Okay? So defy complexity with creativity. Now, complexity, I'll just give one teeny little example. This is the problem. The population of code in North Atlantic is diminishing. With every crisis, people always look for one simple explanation. And the explanation was that since the cod is eaten by herb seals and the cod is crustaceans, the reason that the population of cod is diminishing is that the population of herb seals is getting out of hand. Linear thinking. And I will say the vast majority of people still think in this way. However, when you look at the entire ecosystem in the North Atlantic and you look at every species and in what way one interacts with the other one, the complete ecosystem looks something like that. And like this is almost everything that we face now. But our thinking has not adjusted to this new reality. So we make decisions in two ways. We need, for some decisions, analytical crutches. Analytics fits in there, and the crutches to deal with complex systems are evolving. The second way in which we make decisions is by intuition. But intuition cannot be built on things that we haven't experienced before. So we are really screwed in here because we don't have the analytical tools and we don't have the intuition. Now, at the end of the day, I believe that the intuition should save the day, but we are building towards that. So our thinking so far is that we can deal with things that are complicated. A complicated thing is things in which we put the parts and each part behaves as we design it. For example, a Patek Philippe may have 1,000 parts, or the Boeing there, the jumbo jet, has 6 million parts, but the parts don't evolve, don't adapt. Every part is locked into a function, as opposed to, for example, if you can call a fish simple, every fish is identical, out of the behavior of those simple fish emerges this cloud school of fish that will be impossible to predict. There is no fish CEO in there calling the shots. Everything happens, okay? And since we cannot understand that,
Julio.
yeah, how can we understand, for example, a system that involves individual decisions, immunizations, traffic, like, for example, what links the air traffic with epidemics as happened in SARS. That's an example of a complex system. So our thinking, if anything, is still on the side of complicated. But as I said, and I love this quote, the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. The problem now is that we don't have the servants even. So we cannot use the intuitive mind. However, since I mentioned intuitive mind and intuition is associated with creativity, let me kind of say something about the two ways to think about this. So intuition is on the right side, analysis, rational thinking, and so on is on the left, okay? So to drive the point home, let me show you that the brain is a very complicated thing, okay? And I have tried to educate myself by asking questions to colleagues who work in this space. So I'll show only one example. There are many, many studies that have been done with people who have suffered massive brain loss. And when you show a signal to people who have, like that thing there on the left, to people who only operate with the left, that's what they see. And when you show the same thing to people who operate only with the right, that's what you see. You need both. You need details matter a lot, big picture matters a lot. So let me just finish very, very quickly with some lessons that come from the right side of the brain, lessons from art. So this is Matisse, same picture several times. This is probably the final one in Leningrad. But when Matisse got bored and didn't know how to paint, he painted the painting. And in here another one. That's his studio with the painting in the back. Lesson. Inspiration is overrated. Any artist will tell you the same thing. Picasso at 15, at 17, at 22, at 40. De Kooning, early de Kooning, late de Kooning. How productive are these people? So Vermeer was one of the most productive with the least number of paintings, except for Leonardo da Vinci. Van Gogh did 900 paintings in the last 2.5 years of his life. Picasso averaged about 2.2 paintings for about 70-year career. Warhol had a much shorter career, 28 years, produced about 125 things. Lesson. Start with a solid grounding, equate creation with hard work. The other lesson in here is one that was mentioned in passing about learning the craft and then setting it aside. In Italian, this is impara l'arte, mettila da parte, which means learn the craft, then set it aside. You will go absolutely nowhere in the art world if you don't forget the craft. Baboon and Yang, composed of all pieces. You will not be able to see this without recognizing that car in the artifact too. But the pieces, once used in there, become completely inseparable from the rest. Picasso, this painting is at the Art Institute. The very short story is that someone was visiting him, mentioned this painting because it appears in the 1968 exhibit in Chicago. The person was someone from Chicago, Bill Hartman, who was a partner in Skidmore. And Picasso said, you know, this painting used to be different. I had an idea, and at the end, I changed. By the way, if you want the other piece missing, I'll give it to you. This is the piece. It's also in the Art Institute. A pity that they don't put it next to it. It's somewhere in the basement. This is the lesson. Okay? So all of these are things that I think you can, either if you don't internalize this, having people who think in a completely different way next to you is very, very important. But I'll finish with the last one, because I think it's the most important one of all, and it's this one. This is also Picasso, done about 1945. Okay? And this is the final picture. The final picture in the way that I order them, because if you look at the dates, this was the first picture. And that's the last one. So the most important lesson of all, and there are very few people who can do both, is learn to see simplicity in complexity. In 1993, the internet started. Who would have seen everything? Or even parts of it. And the other one, learn to see the final picture, the essence, in a very complicated system. So that's all that I have to say, and thank you so much.